Put simply, what you are feeling is gelling occurring, things configuring. It is as though a period of reconfiguration is coming to an end. And as it happens, you are momentarily being less able to put your finger on the pulse of what is happening. I encourage you to be patient here, patience not requiring more than another 3 to 6 weeks. I encourage you to set aside a tendency to be reactive and to be calmly and genuinely curious. It's as simple as that. That's the end of the answer.
Thank you. And may I ask an additional one?
Yes.
Thank you. When you talk about willfulness and willfulness, and doing thy will, not my will. But as so many teachers ask us, what is it that you would want to do with your life? What is your passion? Why, if you are experiencing what you have asked for and you are not fulfilled, what is your intention? So what I'm saying is there are questions of self-direction, which I would call willfulness, and yet so many of the questions are asked by, shall we say, leaders of good thought, new thought. The distinction of giving totally up, yielding totally, and yet being specific in terms of what it is you would like to do with the gifts that God has given you. In other words, where do we draw this line? Because giving up totally, in one respect, gives up half of our co-creation, if you will, and I don't want to put words into it. I'll leave the question there, if I've asked it. Or
that is a wonderful way of saying it. Gives up half of our co-creation. Giving up willfulness, giving up your passion, so to speak, is not a matter of giving up your part in co-creation. It amounts to moving into 100% involvement with creation. Co-creation is a word you must be careful of, because it takes two to co-create. And who is going to co-create with God? What is there separate from God to co-create with God? Only that which still has some vestige of an independent ability to act on its own. So, co-creation is what happens when you yield to God and become a participant, you might say, still a sense of two-ness there, a participant in the movement of creation that God is being, by not standing in opposition to it in any way. Not being a separate influence or a counterpart, but becoming 100% involved in that movement without claiming any right to a second opinion or a different point of view or a different way of interpreting what this movement of creation is. Now, I will tell you something. When you talk about following your passion, passion relative to accomplishing things is always an ego dynamic. And passion is always used for the purpose of further establishing independence, further establishing security in that independence, further establishing defense in that independence, security in that independence. You know what? When you yield up your apparent capacity to act independently with passion, and you yield to the Father, you end up being the full expression of the Father's purpose that is unfolding itself right where you are. And because you are in no way inhibiting the movement of God right there where you are, everything you do becomes, quote, on purpose, unquote. It identifies fulfillment, it identifies movement, it identifies and embodies exquisite beauty. And for lack of better words, your being is spectacular like a sunset. What you are being obviously has purpose behind it, but not passion. It has joy behind it, it has peace behind it, and it has love underlying it. And the magnificence of what you be when you give up your independence is or embodies divine order of such magnitude that one would say it evidences great power. So, I would not recommend following your passion. I would recommend following what emerges from your heart that blesses your fellow man by uncovering in him or her the greatest potential he or she has because you recognize their divinity in such a way that it does not inspire in them defense against the uncovering of the best in them. None of what we're talking about is a matter of achieving personal success in any form. Your gift, the gift that God's creation of you constitutes in the universe, will never be something that you as a tiny entity can take credit for. and be proud of. It is only you in the context of the whole and your willingness to fit in and be a part of and be in need of every other part who can thereby become the obvious, flagrant evidence of God's creative power and of the love that God is. And thereby fulfill what you might call your purpose for being. I know this is not satisfying to the ego. This is not what the ego wants to hear. And it does not seem to promise satisfaction or fulfillment. But I am pointing you in exactly the right direction, so that your real function, your real purpose for existing, which was set in place by the Father, not by your imagination, can come forth without anything standing in its way, and thereby constitute you glorifying God. Now, if you are not God, but God is all there is of you, then in your love and glorification of God, you end up glorifying yourself. You end up glorifying the presence of God that is right there where you appear to be, apparently as a separate, independent entity. And so your glorification of God illuminates God because of your love for God. And that love that you glorify God with ends up illuminating you more brightly, which ends up being a blessing to the rest of the brotherhood. But this universal effect will never be the result of a private personal passion you have to do something good. Because that private personal passion will constitute a stepping away from God so that you might have a personal passion and a personal accomplishment that will say something about you personally. And in doing that, the illumination of you dims, and everyone else suffers in the loss of the light. That it is your function to be sharing and extending. The New Age idea of looking for what you really want to do and what your passion is very popular because it really does please the ego. At the bottom line, ultimately, the Father's will is your will. Your will is not in any way distinctly different from the Father's will. And because it is not in any way distinctly different, you can't find God's will and your will being identical to God's will. It's all God. And your experience of this is your joy. And your experience of this is what gives you the capacity to be love, unconditionally, unreservedly. But you know, most of all, it allows you to come into a conscious experience of oneness with all of creation, an intimate, conscious experience with all of creation, in which every aspect of creation shares all of itself with every other aspect of creation. It is a glorious experience. And what you would call every aspect of creation, you might say, sits in observation of the movement of all of creation, which God is being, and which no part of creation is viewing with a separate, private perception of. And again, the joy of the movement of creation that God is being is the conscious experience and the conscious gift which every aspect of creation shares with every other aspect of creation. And the joy is so infinite, you might say, I cannot find the correct words, is so infinite and so glorious that it is inconceivable that there could be any other more significant, more significantly meaningful experience. The fly in the ointment, you might say, and the one and only thing that needs to be corrected is the act of independent willfulness and its replacement with need, the recognition of need, becoming defenseless against your fellow man, indeed, every aspect of creation. You're letting it in and being touched by it without attempting to immediately bring into play the practice of manipulation and control. And then being communicative with all of creation, not hiding any of the glorious experience of reality that one finds himself or herself experiencing, and thereby magnifying the wholeness instead of the separateness. So don't be confused. Are you after being a better ego, going for your passion with gusto, building up a personal private sense of worthyhood? Or are you interested in waking up and having the experience of what worth truly is and fulfillment truly is. And above all, are you willing to do it right here, today and tomorrow and the next day, in the middle of the kingdom of heaven, where what everything really is awaiting your perception of it, your comprehension of it? Because remember again that these sort of vast creative descriptions I have just given to you aren't about somewhere else. They're about right here, with each other and with everything you're seeing. Be careful of what you have a passion about. Because as I said, at the bottom line, what you have a passion about is what will preserve your separateness, ensure your safety in it, and provide defense against anything upsetting it. And that's called the human condition, which you're already suffering from. You certainly don't want the human condition to be reinforced by your spiritual path. It was a long time between gatherings, and I have enjoyed the encounter again. Paul wonders why I say this, but it is meaningful to me to be with you like this. Even though I am always with you. Thank you. I acknowledge you. I appreciate you for being my brothers and sisters. I want you to know that. You need to know that. Oh, you know, Jesus loves you. Well, of course Jesus loves you. He's Jesus. I don't love you because I'm Jesus. I love you just because. And you love me just because. And you love each other just because. And the sooner you realize that that's the only way you can love each other, you'll get rid of all this manipulative chicken shit control that gets in the way of your joy. And the harmony that you can be enjoying with each other. So, on that note, I will say I look forward to being with you next time. You are welcome.